Kia ora koutou, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to look to resume arts, culture and heritage. I know we're all just, you heard my dulcet tones. Excellent. So we are in the middle, well, 3/4 of the way through the Cultural Council Controlled Organisations Annual Report 2019 to 20. Having already heard from 3 of our cultural CCOs, I'm now going to invite the representatives of Te Manawa, whoever would like to come forward, to come and speak to your annual report for 1920. And we'll take the opportunity to welcome Adrian van Dijk, who is a new trustee at Te Manawa. Nice to have you with us in the chamber today, Adrian. Thank you for making the time. So, over to you for your report, please. I'm looking at you, John. Are you leading off?
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mayor Grant and councillors. Last year was dominated, of course, by the COVID crisis and its after effects, and we're obviously no exception to that. We remain in a state of uncertainty as the final effect of the pandemic and its ramifications for New Zealand and Palmerston North. But one thing we have had in our favour is the leadership of the country and also the city that rose to the occasion. Regardless of politics and individual interest, I think we had good backup from council officers and staff as we worked through these matters. As Andy's going to elaborate on, we were required to close for a considerable time, but our team were able to work on projects remotely and also keep our facilities safe and ready to reopen. We owe our team a sincere vote of thanks for their efforts during this time and in the reopening period and since. Andy's going to tell you about the activities we've been able to engage in and deliver both prior to and subsequent to lockdown, and I don't propose to repeat those, but the restricted level of activity did have a significant financial effect, and activities have had to be moved into the current financial year. A number of positive initiatives were possible, however. Palmerston North City Council initiated improvements to the Statement of Expectation and Statement of Intent process, which culminated in a productive workshop with councillors and officers. This process clarified the areas that we're able to concentrate on, or that we are rather to concentrate on, and in the future, and we were given clear guidance to concentrate on the areas we should focus most of our efforts in. These have been taken on board and will be reflected in our revised business plan, which is currently in its draft form. Now the latest appointments have been confirmed to our board, as you noted, Madam Chair. We've begun a planning process within the Trust Board with the aim of initially clarifying our overall vision statement and then sharpening our strategic planning and business plan. We're fortunate to have a strong skills-based board, and saying that, I'm conscious that the volunteer members of our Trust Board give freely of their time for the good of the organisation. We must never take that for granted. Turning to the team at Te Manawa, a new Wellbeing Committee has been formed, reporting through to the Audit and Risk Committee of the Board. This group has the objective of checking in on and monitoring staff wellbeing generally, and its first action has been to initiate a regular staff survey so team members can give confidential feedback to the organisation and the leadership team in particular. 360-degree appraisals are now in the design phase for the leadership team, and we'll watch progress on these measures carefully. The Science, Art and Museum Societies now have full representation on our collection committee, and their joint and individual input and communication remains an asset to us and helps us to maintain the intellectual independence so important to our success. Rangatani, our iwi partners, continue to guide us and work closely with us, and there are developments in the planning phase for the next few years that will further enhance this as the vision for Rangamārie, the cultural centre within Te Manawa, comes to realisation. I'll now hand over to Andy to comment on more operational aspects of the last period. Thank you.
Katoa, he mihi nui kia koutou I rungi te kaupapa te rā, he mihi tēnei ki rangitāne, te iwi o te rohi nei, o reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora, John, thank you for that. I wanted to touch on the fact that museums, as you know, around the world have been closing and have been under huge stress over this period and continue to be under the stress for around COVID-19, and we're really fortunate to be to continue to be supported by the Palmerston North City Council in this situation, and I really want to acknowledge the council for their support, in particular over the lockdown March 20th to May the 18th, 2020. And I want to say also that the communication with and interest in the wellbeing of our staff over that time was really noted and appreciated. As you know, visitor numbers to Te Manawa started to decrease from January 2020 onwards as news of COVID-19 spread. As well as this, some of our international venues that were confirmed to take our own developed touring exhibitions, like the Ashburton Museum, Forrester Gallery, and others had to pull out. All large events, exhibitions and functions that were planned from February to June 2020 were cancelled or postponed. Our online reach increased though from 634,000 to 664, which is a real indication of our strong online presence, particularly with innovative learning programs delivered digitally during the lockdown and some online exhibition initiatives. During last year, I was appointed to the Te Papa Trust Board, which is an acknowledgement of the work that the Te Manawa team has been doing, especially around inclusivity on an international stage. And I really want to thank Councillors Rachel Bowen, Brent Barrett, Lorna Johnston and Zulfika Butt for taking the time to attend my pōwhiri at the board of Te Papa under quite short notice. The chair of the Te Papa Trust, Dame Fran Wild, spoke then about Te Papa now having the opportunity to learn from what we have been doing here in this region and at Te Manawa, particularly around inclusivity. So, you know, some of the outputs of the work that we've been doing, you'll be able to see in terms of the Ihc Art Awards, with Malakai Aldridge now being the winner of the Ihc Art Awards for the country this year, who's been working with us on the NOR program, the Ngā Toa Patrick Bronte interviews, and the Sanders Cave exhibition being presented in sign language to members of Te Whaotiaroa Manawatu. Those are just little examples of those things. Digital exhibitions we've developed in response to COVID-19, like Common Pause, are also breaking new ground. So 22 exhibitions over the year include Colin McCann 100 Years, which was part of the National McCann Commemorative Trail, the award-winning nanoscience-focused exhibition developed by MOTAT, Mighty Small, Mighty Bright. We've had the Palmerston North Women's Health Collective fundraiser, which was for $25,000 raised for the Women's Health Collective. We've been involved with Ngā Kite Toi, which is from the Wānanga in terms of exhibitions, and lots of other exhibitions, including United Arab Emirates, Alamalia and Ngā Toa. So the first stage of the refresh of the ever-popular Kids TM was completed with funds donated by a range of local companies in that year too. The collection continues to grow and gather support from our community. We're excited to receive a 100-year-old time capsule from St Paul's Methodist Church, and also a donation from an anonymous donor for an Andrew Drummond sculptural work for Te Manawa, which is a hugely significant piece of work for us and also for the region. The Manawatu sculpture Falling Waters was refurbished and installed on the Conference and Function Centre, which, as you know, is a joint project between PNCC, the Sculpture Trust and Te Manawa, and it will be a huge asset for the city. We're just waiting for Fred Graham to be able to come down so we can open it up. The continuing focus on increasing vibrancy has enabled Te Manawa to develop and grow emerging audiences, including youth. Over 100 events were delivered, both on-site and off-site, and enable communities to interact with Te Manawa in multiple ways, including Māori Language Week, Haunted Museum at the Esplanade, Te Manawa After Dark, laser tag, those sorts of things. In terms of learning, despite the ongoing impacts of COVID-19 on engagement of face-to-face learning experiences, we had a strong year with a total of 21,316 people participating in learning programs and activities, which was heading towards target until COVID hit. We had visitors travel to attend learning experiences from Levin, Fielding, Pahiatua, Whanganui, Masterton, Dannevirke, Waikanae, Halcombe, Martin, Taihape in our local Palmerston North district. Te Manawa became the first museum in New Zealand to become accredited by Alzheimer's New Zealand, is working towards becoming dementia-friendly that year too. And surprisingly, our end-of-year visitor numbers still managed to make over 100,000 people through the door, which is quite amazing given that the numbers were were decreasing from half of the year. Feedback, we've had 99% rated their experience at Te Manawa excellent or good. So we've also been working on numbers of relationships over the time, and we've been Really excited to see that the Urban Eels project, which started with discussions with He Ngāti Kini and Norwine about the urban eels, has come to fruition as well. Lots of things we've been working on, which I won't go into detail too much more, but huge connections with organisations around mental health as well were established over that year. I want to thank Rangitane Iwi, PNCC, Manawatu District Council and many collaborators, supporters, sponsors including UCOL, Westpac, Yorb, Massey University, Inspire.net, FMG, Vitae Services, the Crozier family, artists and volunteers, Te Wānanga, IPU, DOC and other community organisations. I really want to thank the Te Manawa team for their commitment and creativity over the past year too. We've come through some quite robust review processes and we're now focusing on developing, as John says, the solid business plan to include our stakeholder relationship and inclusion, fundraising, and a 3-year and onward program of exhibitions, upgrades and key events supported by innovative learning programs. Te Manawa has some exciting family-friendly and interactive exhibitions coming up and is planning to connect into PN 150, Massey Māori Arts 25th year, which is this year, and with particular focus on science, technology and the environment. So, in closing, the future impact of COVID-19 on cultural facilities around the world and the country is not yet known. We do know that there will be an increased focus on the local, regional and national markets. With a severe reduction in international exhibition movement, there are opportunities to collaborate with other facilities and organisations, both national and regional. And this is a time when experimental and collaborative drivers, those ones behind the Museum Without Boundaries concept, are at the forefront of thinking in museums. The United Nations has listed anti-racism, increasing marginalisation, loneliness and climate change as key challenges for our world. Museums need to be acutely aware of these as we move forward. In this year, Te Manawa also joined the Federation of International Human Rights Museums. Te Manawa's awareness of the potential for ongoing COVID-19 related issues has called for more urgent pivoting towards digital experiences and towards new opportunities that arise from the community need for human connection, optimism and a trusted place to go for information. Thank you very much. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Thank you, Andy. We will open for questions. And I just wanted to start, I think, with drilling down into that question about visitor numbers, which has been a particular interest over the years. And so my question is about physical visitor numbers. And I'm noting that in the context of your total visitor numbers, including digital, being really strong, and congratulations on that. I mean that absolutely genuinely. But it does concern me that we're still seeing a fall-off in actual physical visitor numbers. And I'm not sure how much of that can be solely attributed to COVID, because when I look at in the comments, the art gallery didn't meet target, but was at 88% achieved. Learning visits were at 70% achieved, whereas people through the door was at just under 60% achieved. So there does seem to be what story are the figures telling us? That's what I'm asking.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, well, I think there was definitely a fall-off due to COVID for, the reasons that we talked about. Target of 150,000 is a lot, and when we started talking about these high targets of 170, 180 based on previous exhibitions that we've had, sometimes that puts a different lens over it, because sometimes these are a long period. We talk about a 5-year period where we might have an exhibition that might attract a lot of people, and then the next year we might not have an exhibition that would do that. So it's kind of a period of time that can take in and would have fluctuating numbers. So, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that's something I'll continue to be interested in. And also, this wasn't in your report, I don't think, but did I just hear you say laser tag?
Yes.
How and why is there laser tag in the museum?
Well, that's right. A lot of these things, when I was talking about things that might appeal to the youth market and those ones who are interested in getting into museums in different ways, it's kind of that museum without boundaries, beyond boundaries, where there's a leg in or a kind of a point of contact that they feel is something they like to do or they like to see happening and also, you know, that's a way that they can then see what else is going on in the museum, so get a flavour for the museum environment and also feel comfortable in those kind of places. So it's attracting, it's something that's attracting youth, but it's also making sure that museums are doing things in different ways in different spaces and bringing new ideas into these spaces.
So was it popular?
Yes, it's really popular, yeah.
Can you give us an idea of numbers?
Well, they're full every time, I think, these ones. They have them quite often. We've had a few now. And Nerf wars as well.
So what kind of numbers is that?
Nerf guns.
No, I know what a Nerf gun is. I'm really clear on that. How many people are coming to these things?
I can't remember exactly. I think one night we had 400 or 500 come to one. So it's quite a lot of kids running around the place with little foam guns. So, yeah.
Is that not dangerous to the exhibits?
They're very light. They don't damage anything. Yeah.
Other people have other questions, so let's move on.
Madam Chair, if I could just add a comment to that. I think there's sort of a balance between entertainment events and, if you like, we cover a full range. There's entertainment events, kids running around with little guns at one end of the spectrum, to what could be regarded as serious art at the other end. So somewhere there's a balance, and part of the story behind the numbers over the last few years has been that we haven't had any what used to be called big blockbuster exhibitions. What we're looking at the moment are opportunities that may exist between New Zealand and Australia in this post-COVID environment, where maybe we can't get a lot of things in from Europe because they're just about to shut down completely again. But we're looking at opportunities within the South Pacific and closer regions to bring things in that can attract people both from within the Manawatu and outside. The numbers that we, in the first quarter of this year, have actually started to come forward a bit, but there's still work to be done on that. And I think that's part of the story. We have to be imaginative about what we can attract in New Zealand and Australia, get things in that people otherwise wouldn't be able to see, and start to get those numbers coming back again. And one example of that is we had a visit from the Mexican ambassador last weekend, and one of the things he's talking about is the fact that they've got exhibitions in Mexico that can actually get down here that are smaller. One that he was talking about was basically a digitally based exhibition, and they're smaller, they're more easily transportable without large numbers of people having to travel around the world, and we can maybe use some of these to attract people from within our city as well as the wider region. So it's something that's going to be applying a bit of imagination, but there's work in progress.
Thank you, John. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, team. So my question is just around the comments, Andy, that you made and are in your report about potentially the role of museums in addressing anti-racism. And I just wondered whether you already feed into or you considered feeding into the Welcoming Communities Advisory Group?
You mean personally or Te Manawa?
Te Manawa.
Te Manawa. No, we haven't really. We've sort of been involved peripherally, but not really, yeah.
Because I wonder if that's an opportunity for, if you like, piggybacking onto the programme that Council's already running, and which could have some benefits for both the programme itself and Te Manawa. So it's just a thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Looking at page 287 of the programme. So it's really the financial effects of COVID, and I think you've estimated the effects on visitor numbers as a reduction of 30,000. I think that's how you summed it up. And so it's the cost of not having the doors open, not running programs, not having anything open. 30,000. I think that answers the Chair's question that she was asking before.
Right.
So that's the cost of not having anything open. The other side to that is, did you apply for the wage subsidy? Because it's not in any of your, you didn't?
I think, Catherine, you can probably answer that.
Sorry, we weren't able to because we couldn't demonstrate the reduction in revenue that the legislation required. Because thanks to your generous grant, that kept us with an income that was above 70%.
Sure. Okay. Second question's around the funding from community organisations. If you look at the two columns, they're quite disperse. Just asking the question around when you're putting your funding applications in, you're obviously still looking to the same organisations, and I'm assuming that you're getting knocked back.
Yes, we are.
Is there reasons why?
To be fair, we didn't have many projects during that financial year where we could apply for funding. We did get some community funding towards the kids' redevelopment that's going ahead at the moment. But we didn't have any other major projects where we could apply for funding except for the Falling Waters and Lotto, and the stained glass windows. Lotto gave us some money too.
Thanks, Catherine. There were some projects we had lined up, but then we couldn't do them during the COVID time. So there's no point applying for funding for them.
And to get the corporate funding, how hard was that, like from Westpac?
It was great. It was a conversation, and I need to mention Adrian because he was integral to that conversation. Yes, it's conversations and relationship building. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, John and Andy. Again, about the visitor numbers, I was thinking, looking at the quality of events we are having at Te Manawa and the numbers I have observed, I was thinking whether we are setting up realistic targets for our visitor numbers, and are we following any standards or set standards to set up our targets?
It's a really good question. We've talked about this before, but for an institution our size, they're all different throughout the country. And as you know, some have science, some have arts, some have just art and history. So it's hard to get parity. But an institution our size would usually get somewhere between 100 and 110,000 physical visits a year. So we set our targets high. And sometimes it's caused us problems, because we got, for instance, quite a few people for the dinosaur show, for instance, and other things that have come along over time. And so we go, right, we're going to put it that high, and then we're going to achieve that every year, it's sort of what I was talking about before, was trying to get a bit more of a a cycle of 5 years. Say where we know we're going to have a blockbuster type or a big show, international show this year, and then we have one that's a little less. We focus on developing our own touring show that we can then tour out the second year. So we're working on a business plan that would do something like that, and so therefore we'd get more accurate, or at least reasonable numbers attached to each year, based on those shows. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, team, for being here. Just had one basic question, I suppose, around the report that's come through on the papers. It's marked as a draft annual report, and I just wondered if that had been your intent to submit a draft, and if so, why that was the case.
I think basically the intent around that was that we've had, as the council has, I think, as well, had trouble getting auditors to complete their work this year. So we've been sort of sitting in this limbo state, waiting to get the audit report so that we can finalise our annual report and have an annual general meeting. And so we've sort of had this moving feast of dates rolling back. Right. We've spiked a date, and we've just still got a couple of things we're still sorting out with the auditors, but they're going to be done this week, aren't they, Andy? And once that's done and we get the audit report, we can complete the report. It is pretty much in final form now, and we don't anticipate any big variances from anything.
Thanks, that's helpful, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, people. Page 15, the financials. So obviously COVID has had some good stuff in terms of the financials, because you've turned the ship round quite significantly, but obviously that's with less spending, is that right?
That's right.
It is less spending. Some of it relates to unfilled positions. So we've saved there. There was also a project that the collections manager had hoped to have finished by the end of the financial year, but he didn't even have it started. So there was savings on that.
Okay, and I think...
But that's had to be put into this year.
Right. And I think where Councillor Harper was talking about was on page, your 33, our 275, just around other operating revenue. And again, I'm picking it's because, you know, the community grants are down, the sponsorships down, and the touring revenue down. You've answered some of those questions, but I suspect COVID's had a bit of an impact there as well. Okay. All right, just two other questions. Andy, you touched on working with other institutions. Are you working with your colleagues, you know, like some of the, we've just heard the theatres and pivoting around the domestic tourism. Are you working with some of your colleagues in Whanganui, Hawke's Bay and Taranaki?
We are working with them. We don't have specific projects right now that we're working on, but we are talking about a particular trail as well of things that are going on. And also I'm part of the Aotearoa Gallery Directors Network, so we're working on a joint project where we will be all inputting into things like Art Now and those kinds of things. So there's sort of higher level communication tools that we're working on together. Yeah.
But is there any sort of traction on that? I get the talking part, but are we doing anything more than, because I don't want to have the same conversation about COVID next year and the visitor numbers, that's all. I was just thinking of what, you've got to pivot. Yep. The theatres have, you're quite similar.
Yep.
And being a fixed structure, the theatres are starting to get pivoting, starting to get people back. I just wonder how you're going to get people back.
Can I just interject there to say that we have a presentation coming to Arts, Culture and Heritage in February on a coastal art trail project, which is working across, it's a Cedar-led piece of work, but I know Te Manawa have been involved with that, also with our own Square Edge Community Arts and working across our neighbouring up into Wanganui, New Plymouth as well, hopefully aiming down towards Wellington. So there's a piece of work in process there, which I think Mr Mayor will...
That's 4 months away.
Yeah, it is, and they're busily working on it. So I'm hoping by February they'll be able to tell us what's going to happen.
So, anything else?
There's quite a few digital projects we're working on with other museums at the moment. There's one that we created during lockdown, Everyday People and Common Pause, which other museums are quite interested in taking from us, and working on another version. So we're in discussions around that right now.
Okay. If I could just add a comment, I think the short answer is probably not enough, and we need to put a bit more effort into it.
Yeah.
Because I guess there are two countervailing things that happen. One is people want to keep their own work to themselves, but maybe see other institutions as being competitors, but it's time to get over that. And I think the 4 months away, that's a long time for a project, but I think there's some work that can be done in the meantime as well.
Yeah, I mean, just even Foxton, you know, great little museum there. Ironically, 150,000 plus visitors, according to the Horowhenua District Council. And you know, I just wonder if you could be partnering, because, you know, we share sort of neighbouring iwis. There's all sorts of stories, I think, that could be shared, and simple stuff done.
Yep. And as I say, I think the thing there is you can actually overreach by looking too far abroad and not actually taking advantage of what's closer to you. So yeah, we take your point.
Now, well done on the financials.
Johnson.
Yes, it was just a thought that came to me apropos of the questioning about visitor numbers, and I wonder if a 3 or a 5 year rolling average would be a fairer way of representing the visitor numbers, because that would iron out fluctuations that you might get one year because of dinosaurs, and give us a bit of a better picture. Otherwise, I think there's a risk that people are reactive to a low number one year when it might be high the next year. So
That's great.
I don't know what you think about that.
No, totally, and this is what we're incorporating into the business planning, is that kind of rolling, you know, the 5 year period that will cover those different things. So yeah, absolutely important. And to be fair, you know, Te Awaho is also a library, it's brand new, you know, so there's always mitigating factors to these things, but absolutely looking at a rolling program, yeah.
So, but at the moment, that's not included in your
No,
SOE.
no, that's not, but we want it.
Thank you.
There are no further questions. Thank you very much for presenting. I'd like to take a step back. We will move into debate. So I'm happy to move the recommendation that the memorandum entitled Cultural Council-Controlled Organisations Annual Reports 2019-20 presented to Arts, Culture and Heritage today be received. Look for a seconder for that. Councillor Naylor, thank you. Yes, sorry, there's 3 recommendations. I was only looking at the one on the screen. We'll take them all together, unless there's any objection to that. No? Good. So the recommendations as in your order paper. And I'll open for comments on all of the recommendations. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been really good to read of the progress and work of all the CCOs and hear from them today. In particular, in a challenging COVID year, I guess I was expecting some of those challenges to be negatively reflected in the financials. So it's been really encouraging to see how CCOs have actually overcome those challenges and, you know, to actually see a stronger financial picture for all CCOs than were forecast or expected, with stronger surpluses from 3 of the CCOs and a smaller deficit than budgeted for the 4th one. So that's really encouraging to see that, and also encouraging to see the work of those CCOs.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just did want to comment that I think all of the CCOs have risen to the challenge this year in a way that we should be quite grateful for, because it's been exceptionally difficult to be a venue that is looking to have crowds of people in when you've got to be locked down. And yet, you know, each CCO has done its part to try and either do things differently or bring something new in, or being innovative, you know, particularly with the Regent with their internal barriers, was going above and beyond. And so I think just generally, all of the CCOs are to be commended for the work that they've done this year under very difficult circumstances. I was also pleased to hear that all of them mentioned the support that they had had from council staff and the checking in, and I think that needs to be acknowledged and appreciated also. Just specifically, I'm pleased to see Te Manawa introducing a Wellbeing Committee for staff, and I look forward to hearing what differences that might be able to make. And in terms of the Globe and the Regent, there's been some new ideas, some new thinking, and I think it's looking quite hopeful there for things going forward in terms of being able to keep the numbers up, provide some cultural capital, I suppose, for people to be able to go and enjoy, because after you've been locked down for a while, it's actually quite nice to be able to go out to something. And I think in terms of the sort of stress on staff, I'm hopeful that they'll all be able to get a good rest over the Christmas New Year period and come back refreshed.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been particularly fond this year of a Churchill quote, which was, "Never waste a good crisis." And I think that's what we've seen from our CCOs, particularly in this. Acacia Birch have managed continuity of service in challenging circumstances, some of which is to do with COVID, some of which is to do with us. The Regent, as Councillor Johnson mentioned, it created internal walls and turned themselves into 4 separate venues, getting a response out of the all-of-government response unit within 24 hours to enable them to pivot to do that. That is quite an impressively nimble response from a council-controlled organisation. I know our own officers were involved in helping them do that, and I was personally delighted to see it, and I know Act 3 Productions were specifically and financially delighted. In the context of the Regent and in that third recommendation, I want to draw particular attention to the work over the years of Martin Carr, who has resigned as a trustee this year. Martin has served on the Regent Trust Board for a very long time as a general member, also as deputy chair. And I know his institutional knowledge and hard work will be missed around that table. So that's a specific thanks that I would express here. The Globe, again, continue to astound me with what they're managing to achieve outside the scope of last year's annual reports, but that bounce back from COVID, where weekend after weekend I was noticing the sold out signs go up, showed not only that our community was ready to come out and do something, anything, but actually that the Globe was seen as a safe place for people to be able to do that. And that's in no small part to the environment that's been created by the staff and board there, and it's noted with thanks. Thank you for that. And Te Manawa, actually when you were speaking about what you're planning, it harked back to me from Harry's presentation this morning about Creative Sounds, the stomach, which has a very similar kaupapa, I think, of going, well, the stomach is the place that we do it, but creative sound is the thing that we do. And I think I've struggled for a while to understand what this museum without boundaries concept was all about. But I think Harry's presentation this morning actually really helped me to understand that, is that what we want for our cultural organisations to be more than a venue, but to be a way of working, a way of supporting each other, of working across not just the sector, but the city, to create the kind of vibrant place that we want to live. So thank you for the work that you do. I'm always delighted to hear about anonymous donations and things being handed over and contributions from the business community. That's all excellent, but it sits within the bigger picture of what we're trying to achieve, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you from me. And Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I just want to withdraw a comment that was made a little bit earlier before.
Okay.
So start with that.
Thank you.
On a positive note, just like to acknowledge all the CCOs, the Regent, the Globe, Te Manawa and Cashier Birch. I think they've all pivoted really well and echo the comments made by other members. Financially, amazing, really. We were ringing you in COVID and connecting with you, expecting the worst. And Te Manawa did an exceptional job. I know some of it is due to COVID and not the spending, but you've turned it around really, really well. And not all CCOs, cultural CCOs, have been able to do that in other cities. The hand has actually been out to this sort of table. So it just shows you how resilient they have been. And also the theatres especially have been very creative in attracting their numbers, and again I concur with all the comments previously. I do think we need to look at our wider region. I've just Googled what Auckland Museum is doing, and they've identified they've got a campaign on Palmerston, North Wellington and Christchurch. So they're looking for us to go and visit the Auckland Museum. I think we should be going to them and looking for Aucklanders to come here. So I'll leave that with our colleagues, but thank them for the service they've given this year, because it could have been a lot worse. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we will put all three of those recommendations to the vote, please. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now I invite Te Manawa Museum's Trust Board back to the table to present their quarterly update, which is for the first quarter of this financial year, July to September. Elected members, you'll note in the summary memorandum on top of it that this quarterly report has come about as a result of our request through the Statement of Intent process earlier in the year, where there was a recommendation came through that specifically, that Te Manawa would respond to particular concerns raised in debate by making themselves available quarterly, which effectively means at every arts, culture and heritage meeting, to speak to that. So Andy will hand over to you for that, or John, if you have comments. Over to you, Andy.
Kia ora koutou, anō. just a little brief, speedy little video to start with. It's just a couple of minutes, so we'll just play that first. It's just about things that have happened over the first quarter. Thanks, everybody. Just a quick one to show a few things. Well, just today, it's just been announced that Te Manawa was a finalist in the Manawatu Business Awards, so we're pretty excited about a lot of the inclusive projects we worked on during the first quarter and also in just before the first quarter. So some of those I just touched on before. But as you know, the levels of COVID-19 affected the first half, really, or first 6 weeks of the first quarter in terms of numbers. But we're still doing really well, I think, in terms of numbers coming up. We've worked over this quarter really hard to get a solid program for exhibitions coming up, and this is going to feed into the business plan too, and it has been, so that we can provide this plan for the international projects we're working on. We've got a range of interactive and cross-generational products coming up. Mechanical Cabaret is a fantastic exhibition coming through, and also working on an international photography show, which is the World Wildlife Photographer of the Year at the moment that we're hoping to get happening. The revamped kids team is now called Tamariki, is going to launch just before the Christmas holidays, and that's the money that Westpac have put towards that, which is making that happen. We've got Santa's Cave, which is going to have it's going to have a shop in it this year, and also working on planned refreshes for Te Awa and the conservatory and the Dino Dig. So we've got some concept design starting to be put forward in next financial year. The Bugs exhibition, our Backyard Heroes Bugs, has been doing really well. We've had about 4,000 people through the first week, so we're pretty excited about that, and school bookings are almost full till the end of the year. We've got working with Toiho, as you know, it's 25 years of Massey Māori Arts this year, so we've got a selection of shows happening there. We had the Teachers Exhibition recently, Ki Mua Ki Muri, and we've got Matatau opening on Friday, so lots of things happening. I was keynote speaker for the Alberta Museums Association in Canada, which is their first online conference, which was pretty amazing. They had been following us through Nina Simon, through Of By For All, and that's what we did there, which was pretty exciting. And there is something in the SOI that that's actually noted as incorrect, because we have been doing a lot of work in partnerships over this quarter, and we've said not much progress. But actually, when I see the list of all the partnerships, there's actually heaps of work we've been doing. So I'm not going to go through them all, but we're working with the New Zealand Rugby Museum on a women's rugby exhibition, which should go to France. So that will be installed at Te Manawa first, hopefully around International Women's Day. We've got the iwi engagement with the Rongomo Rangi Māori project. Manawatu District Council, thank you, Rachel, for attending the presentation for for that one. So we've got work happening with them. Art Society, lots of programs in terms of tours and connection into fundraising with them, which we're working on a program with at the moment too. Museum Society, working on, we have a bequest from the Cleverley Trust of $60,000, and we're working with Museum Society on a Childhood in the Manawatu book, which will hopefully come out in the next year or so, and that Margaret Tennant will be helping on that as well. She's part of the Museum Society. Science Centre, we've been working with the Science Lives Here concept. The Te Awa redevelopment, the Te Awa exhibition redevelopment and refresh will feed into that, and the Science Centre are quite keen to support us on other science initiatives. We can't really announce it yet, but we've just got some, I can't really say who from, but some funding to run some, continue the chemistry shows that Dr. Naffa was running, those amazing chemistry shows at Te Manawa, a program of those into the next year, so those kinds of things. So lots of things have been happening with relationships actually. So yes, I think I'll better stop there, but thank you.
Thank you, because I did have a question about that. No progress on strategic partnerships work to date. So maybe what you're saying is no formal written down planning around that, but lots of things happening.
Yeah, it's a little bit incorrect, that note actually.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Just a quick question about the shop sales. Is that total sales or is that profit, that 11,008?
It's sales.
So that's sales. Okay, thank you.
So do you make a profit?
We do.
Okay. Good.
No.
Okay. Well, there don't seem to be any further questions. So, thank you. So, recommendation on the screen. The committee resolves that the Te Manawa Museums Trust Board quarterly update presented to us today be received for information, which I will move, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Any comments? Then we will look to vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving to item 11 on the agenda, which is Statements of Expectation for Cultural Council-controlled organisations, 2021 to 22. We're starting to look forward now, presented by Julie. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a good segue actually from Andy and Te Manawa's presentation, referring to the work that was done in developing the Statements of Expectations in 2019. Given that there's been no change yet in Council's strategic direction or ongoing work there, and also, I guess, considering the difficulties that have arisen due to the earlier lockdown this year, what we're proposing is that the current statements are rolled over for CCOs to respond to early next year with their statements of intent. I'm happy to have questions.
Any questions for Julie? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Julie. I guess the idea of rolling over, given that it has been an unprecedented year, is it your view that the statement of expectations are sufficiently broad that it gives the CCOs opportunity to come back with a very adaptive response around post-COVID?
I guess as the report notes, if Council isn't making changes to the statement of expectation, then it would probably be unreasonable to expect that the CCOs would respond with anything other than a reasonably similar statement of intent. I guess significant work was done on those statements of intent in 2019, and as has already been alluded to today, there's quite a lot of compliance that goes on with running a CCO. So this is one of those processes that seems to be happening constantly. So it seems reasonable that all that work would be allowed to develop and, to see the fruits of it, especially given the COVID lockdown and the changes that CCOs had to adapt to earlier this year. So yes, they can still respond and highlight things and make adaptations as they see fit, and council still will consider that response. That's the role of council in this. What we're suggesting is that this is not an appropriate time to be changing anything significantly in terms of what's expected of the CCOs. Does that answer your question?
It helps, yeah. So I guess in terms of the sort of communication that would sit alongside this, I guess, is how will it be made explicit to the CCOs that obviously we're aware that 2020 was something we absolutely didn't expect, and that we're welcoming an adaptive sort of response from them?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I mean, there's constant communication at all levels, I suppose, and so the statement of expectation is a fairly detailed document, and the CCOs have flexibility to respond to it as they see fit.
Right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Julia. I just wondered if you thought, in the light of the changes that have occurred due to COVID, whether or not there were any adjustments that needed to be made in the statements of intent because of that? Sorry, statements of expectation, sorry.
I know, it's a statement of something. I think, there could be. To be perfectly honest, we're struggling to manage this process at the moment, and so there hasn't been a great deal of time and resource available to considering this in detail. But I think, given we've just had the reports and the CCOs have all alluded to what their responses have been during the COVID time, I think it would be, everybody's expecting that would be part of the response that comes back in this statement of intent.
Okay, so...
But, if you would like to add specific requests that be responded to, then you could do that through this process.
I guess I'm just trying to clarify that when the CCOs respond, that they might have some comments or some proposals relating to how they're going to deal with.
Yes.
Because some of them all have been affected this year already because of COVID, and we don't know what's coming.
Yes.
So since we haven't specifically referred to that in the statements of expectations, we're still happy to receive some comments around that in the statements of intent.
Yes, and we can make that clear if that's useful.
Yeah.
I guess, so what happens is that the drafts are presented to council, and then council makes comment on them. So obviously there's a discussion at that point. Yeah. It's not just an exchange of documents.
No.
Yeah. So
I guess I just thought,
clear.
Yeah, it's good to make that clear since it's not specifically in the written form. Thank you.
Just following up on a point that Councillor Johnson raised earlier in the Te Manawa discussion, where there was a suggestion about a 5-year rolling average, say, for visitor numbers. There'd be nothing to preclude Te Manawa putting something like that into their statement of intent.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
Regardless of what we do with the statement of expectation.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Julie. It's just probably following on from Councillor Johnson. If we make changes to our thinking in the 10-year plan discussions, how does this affect this process?
It follows along after. So that will then inform the next statement of expectation and then the next statements of intent.
Okay. I just hope we're not narrowing down any thinking from a bigger discussion to a smaller discussion, if that makes any sense. From our 10-year planning discussion to this discussion.
No. I think the process that we're in is looking to the next 12 months, which we're already in, really. So the next time we do statements of expectation, we'll pick up anything that comes through long-term plan. So if anything, we'll be opening the question larger at that point, is my understanding. Thank you for clarifying. No further questions. Thank you, Julie. So there are 2 recommendations to Council that the memorandum entitled Statements of Expectation presented be received, and that Council approves the Statements of Expectation delivered to our CCOs, attachments, as the basis for the Statements of Intent 2021 to 24. I didn't read all of that out because you've got it in front of you. So we're basically rolling over this year's Statements of Expectations. Any comments? Actually, I will move that. Councillor Barrett will second it. Are there any comments? Councillor Barrett.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And just to note that I was heartened by the responses from officers to myself and Councillor Johnson as well, in terms of really teasing out and being explicit that we do recognise as a council that we're now in a post-COVID environment, and while these are multi-year plans, that communication will go to the CCOs that recognise that everything that was foreseen pre-COVID has somewhat changed, and that we're expecting an adaptive response. I had felt that if that wasn't made clear in the communication, it could be a little bit of a blunt-seeming document coming through, but I think as long as there's accompanying communications, that it could be very positively received. So, yeah, happy to support.
Councillor Johnson?
Yes, along the same lines. I think it's fine to roll these over in terms of strategic direction. Things haven't changed, but obviously we're in a different environment, and so I think it's good to be explicit about the fact that we're all aware of the fact we're in a different environment, and we'd expect to see that being reflected back in the statements of intent from the CCOs, even if it isn't specifically spelled out, because we're rolling over the statements of expectation.
Thank you. I'm happy with the process that's been put forward. It probably is a step back to what we used to do when we didn't have what was letters of expectation that became statements of expectation. We didn't used to do that. We just used to get their draft statement of intent. So effectively, they've had our statement of expectation. As the officer said, nothing has changed. We still have those same expectations. They will put forward their draft statements of intent, and we'll talk about it then. So happy to support the recommendation, and we'll ask you to vote. Councillor Harpiter? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving to item 12 on our agenda, status and activities of the Arts Powerhouse Group, presented by Joanne Ransom, our Community Development Manager. I invite you to come down, Joan, take your seat. And accompanied by Gillian Tasker. Thank you, Joanne. Would you like to speak to your report?
This memo is to provide an update on the status and activities of the Arts Powerhouse Steering Group. In 2017-18, the Council developed an LTP for 2018-28, and this saw Council articulate the ambition of Palmerston North having a national reputation as an arts powerhouse. In 2018, key arts organisations, primarily those we had influence over, were formed into the Arts Powerhouse Steering Group. This group met a number of times and grappled with the role of this group and the ambition of a nationwide arts powerhouse reputation. An experienced international arts manager created a strategy with the group which visualised the arts sector in Palmerston North as operating along a spectrum from emerging to professional. The results of all of this valuable strategic work was that the arts sector believes its strength is in providing opportunities to grow artists in the sector, rather than bill itself as an established arts powerhouse. It also became very clear that the sector does not want to be organised by Council, but prefers an organic and self-directed approach, with Council's role being providing support and advice to back the sector's initiatives. The upcoming Papaioia Festival emerged out of the Arts Powerhouse strategic work, and is a terrific example of Council's event and community development teams working in concert with Arts Powerhouse Group member organisations and the wider arts sector to create something truly splendid. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Jo. We'll open that for questions. I had a question about the Arts Local Initiatives Fund, which is supporting the Leadership Development Programme for Young and Emerging Arts Practitioners. How has that been received?
By the arts sector?
Yeah, has there been much take-up of the opportunity? And what does that tell us about how the sector views itself?
It's still actually in the planning stages at the moment. I believe that they are in negotiation with Kainatane, who are going to be involved as well. And it's due to begin early next year. So I think that they already have some candidates that are interested in joining up. And it runs, of course, in partnership with a leadership program which was directed initially at the tenants of Squareage, but into the wider arts community for more established artists.
Excellent. Well, there don't seem to be any questions. Your report obviously covered all the items of interest. Oh, no, spoke too soon. Councillor Beattie has a question.
Just around the finances for the strategy, with 2 people being contracted over that period of time, what did a strategy cost us that we're now not using?
So the strategy, I wouldn't say we're not using it, because actually it articulated how the arts sector saw itself, and the fact that we've got emergent artists right through to professionals, and it also talked about the opportunity to do something which is the Papaoia Festival, and that we wanted to wrap around not just performance aspect, but career development aspects in that. So we're actually using that strategy, and I can't tell you exactly how much it costs, sorry.
Okay, I'll keep that offline for you. Thank you.
There are no further questions. Thank you both. So I will move that we receive that report for information, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Open for any comments. Thank you to the officers for bringing this forward, which was something we requested. I think that term Arts Powerhouse we've discussed in terms of going forward with our long-term plan development. It's kind of a legacy terminology maybe from a previous member who had that as a particular way of articulating how they saw the arts sector. And I think what's come through actually opening that conversation to the sector is that is not how they see themselves. It's not how they would describe what we do, which is not to say that we don't have many powerful attributes. That's just not a definition or not a descriptor that sat particularly comfortably with the sector themselves. And I think it's the right thing to accept that feedback, which wasn't a criticism of the direction, but just a comment on the description itself, which does not take away from the fact that there's lots of things going on. And I'll note now that we have the Papaoia Arts Festival launch this evening, which looks like being a rather fabulous affair. So I look forward to opening that part of the work and then participating in the festival come February. But there are no further comments, so we will put that to vote. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Now, last item on the agenda for today is the committee work schedule, which looks very much like business as usual. Any comments? No comments from the General Manager. I'm happy to move that we receive the work schedule, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Comments, questions? There being none, let's vote. We're good. Carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Tēnā koutou katoa, e mana e nā reo, tēnā tātou katoa.